Hey, what's up? This is Mike from Blood of the Wolf, and today I'm going to show you how to change your neck from this to this using stain. Okay, a couple things before we get started here. Number one, use a neck that you don't care that much about, or that if you make a mistake, you're not going to feel too bad about it if you ruin it. Secondly, it's all about the prep work for this. The actual staining process takes very little time compared to how much time you're going to be spending sanding down the neck and preparing it for the stain. In this video, I'm going to be taking a better safe than sorry approach, so I'm going to be using tape to tape off the back of the neck and some of the binding and some of the inlays. In theory, the stain should not take to the inlays or the binding, but again, you're better safe than sorry. The stain I'm going to be using is Varathane. It's called Classic Black, and that's the stain I used on this Kelly here to get this neck as dark as I did. It looked like the neck on the side here, the one that's on the King V. It was kind of a dark rosewood to begin with, and I went with Classic Black and got the results I did. I've used ebony stain in the past, and it doesn't get quite as dark as I wanted, and it's not going to be a very dramatic change. So if you're going to go through this process, like I said, it's going to be a lot of sanding and prep work. You might as well get some dramatic results. Anyway, let's take a close look at both of these necks here. Actually, let me start with the King V. So as I mentioned, the neck on the Kelly looked kind of like this, like a similar species, if you will, of rosewood. Okay, it was a nice neck. I like the profile's awesome, but you know, I was just going for something darker. And here's the Kelly. Okay, let me hold them up together. Let me see if we can get a side by side here. Okay, there's a nice side by side. All right, materials. You're going to need, this is the stain I'm going to be using, the Varathane Classic Black stain. And by the way, this is plenty. You will not, I mean, this is going to last me forever. You'll need some sandpaper, like 100, 150, 220, 320, and you'll need some painter's tape. That's it, and a lot of patience. Okay, so this is the neck I'm going to be staining. It's a DKMG neck. It's got binding, the piranha inlays. Yeah, I'm going to have to take these strings off. I was hoping to salvage them because they're new-ish, and I'm gonna have to take off the nut too. All right, got the neck taped off. I cleaned the fretboard with some Dunlop fingerboard cleaner and prep. There was a little bit of fretboard oil on the neck still, so I took that off with the cleaner, and now we're going to start sanding. I'm going to start with 150 grit, and with the sanding, what you want to do is, first of all, don't be aggressive. Go light. Let the sandpaper do its job. You don't need to press hard or like muscle the sandpaper around. Be careful around the frets. I have a fret shaping tool, like a fret reshaping tool that I'm going to use after I do this, but you should still be careful. Okay, I'm going to use this plastic paint scraper and just sort of take the sandpaper and like wrap it around like that. And then we're going to start sanding. Let me reposition the camera here. Okay, so now I'm ready to start sanding. What I'm going to do is just... Actually, you know what? I want to make this smaller. Let me cut this down a little bit. So what I don't want to do is sand the binding because my concern is that if I rough up the binding, the stain's going to sink into the grooves that I've created, and then that's going to darken it. So let me just carefully okay, you see that? That's what you want, except you want to kind of sand off the whole fretboard area that you're going to stain. Anything that you don't sand, the stain's not going to take. So again, this is the lengthy process. And then around these inlays, I'm just going to be real careful. I might use the tape around the binding and the inlays. That will probably speed things up a little bit. So okay, so I did tape off the binding here just because I wanted to be careful, and I used a little piece of tape to maneuver around this Piranha inlay. Now, one thing, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but like right next to the fret is it's a very difficult spot to sand. So I'm just gonna have to do my best and work my sandpaper in there. One thing I've done in the past is just sort of fold it up and work it in as best you can. Again, go slow. This is the slow and tedious part of the job, so it just takes time. Okay, the first fret's done. And just 23 more to go. Okay, so here's the neck after sanding with 150 grit. Took about 2 hours to do this. I didn't do it all in one sitting. If I got bored, I just walked away because this is really tedious and it's really boring, this part. So yeah, I used this, wrapped the sandpaper around it, also used a card to get like really close to the frets and stuff like that. Next, the directions on the can say to do 220. I'm going to do 320 because I'm feeling this neck, and at 150 it's kind of rough, and I don't think 220 is going to make that much of a difference, so I'm going to go up to 320. Which is what I did with that Kelly over there, and I got good results with that. So that's what I'm going to be doing next. 320, repeat the process, then clean this off and stain it. Alright, so I finished sanding. Started off with 150 and then I went to 320. I would say I spent about 3 to 4 hours just prepping. Okay, and now it's time to stain. Couple things about this stain. I'm going to kind of shake it and kind of swirl it. Then I'm going to open it up, put on these gloves here, and stain it. And the staining is going to go like that. Now, a couple things here. Make sure you read the directions on the can. Different stains have to sit for different amount of time. This stain, you put it on and you wipe it off immediately, and you'll see why. It's going to be very, very, very dark. Alright, let's stain it. I'm just going to use a very, 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 very little bit of stain. Cover the whole fretboard. I'm even going to go over the binding. Shouldn't stick to the binding. All right. Put that on. Here's what it looks like. And now you just got to wipe it off. So again, you're going to want gloves for this part because otherwise it's going to stain your fingers. So Okay. That's after one coat. That's after one coat and just two kind of rough wipe downs. So this isn't even like a detailed cleaning. I didn't bust out the mineral spirits and a Q-tip, which I will for the end here, just to clean up this binding and the inlays. You're going to also want to clean off your frets too. The stain is not going to take to the frets. It's not going to take to metal. But it is going to just kind of, you're going to have to wipe off the frets, which is what I'm doing right now. And then after I do my second coat, I will thoroughly clean this. And then after the second coat, I'm going to let this dry for like 48 hours. I'm not going to touch it, and then I'll oil it, and that'll be the end of it. So that's how much I got off just off the frets. So you can see here, like the whole staining process takes a long time to sand and clean up, but the staining is like takes like 5 minutes. And then you got 4 hours of work, or at least in my case, 4 hours of sanding. I don't know how long this has been wiping up, 10, 15 minutes. All right, I think that's good enough for now. Again, I'll be doing like a more detailed cleaning with, oh, you know what I do want to do is get around these frets with a Q-tip. All right, so this is how I clean up around the frets. Just kind of take a Q-tip and just get around the frets there. All right, I'm gonna let this sit for 2 hours. Come back and do a second coat. All right, it's been over 2 hours, maybe like 2.5 hours. So I'm gonna put on the second coat. Again, my goal here isn't necessarily to make it any darker. It's just to touch up any of the spots I might have missed. So here we go. Okay, all done with the staining. So now I'm going to close this, get this out of the way so I don't have an accident. I'm going to clean. Okay, that's after my second pass. I feel pretty good about this. There's definitely some spots when you're really close up need a little bit more cleaning, and that's fine. Let me get those with the Q-tip. But anyway, yeah, that's how it looks. I'm gonna give this clean it up with the Q-tip, do some detail work, let it dry for about 48 hours, and then oil it and put it on my guitar, and I'll show you guys that too when it's all done. But all right, so here it is. It's been 2 days, definitely over 48 hours. It's dry, so I'm going to oil it, and then I'm going to put the strings on it, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like all finished. So, using Music Nomad F1 oil. This is the stuff I recommend. Okay, I'm going to wipe off the excess here in a second. Let me pick up the camera here and show you what the neck looks like. And just a little like kind of before and after. Alright, now it's ready to be strung up. Now, a couple things I want to point out that I noticed while I was cleaning this up. sort of inevitable. But if you look really close, like right next to this fret here, let me see if I can, there you go. You can kind of see a little bit of the rosewood showing up there. That's because it's very difficult to sand right next to this fret. And this is what's going to happen if you don't sand carefully. You can see along the binding too, a little bit of rosewood. That's because that's where I couldn't sand. That's where I couldn't sand cleanly. There's a spot. There's some spots. But how close is this camera to the fretboard right now? It's about 2 inches away. So here's what it looks like. This is me just standing in front of the guitar. You can't see that. Once the strings are on, you're totally not gonna see it. So if that's something that's gonna bother you, like this right here, if that's gonna bother you, you probably shouldn't do this, because you're gonna have spots where you just cannot sand. At least I don't have any tips. If someone else has some tips out there, please share them. But that was the best I could do. So, all right, string it up and then I'll show you the final product. All right, here's the finished product. I put the neck on my King V body. It's got the Marzio deactivators, and let me get a close-up of the neck here. I think it looks pretty awesome. I'm pretty happy. It's not perfect. There are some spots where you can still see the rosewood, but I really don't know what to do about that. I mean, about 4 hours of sanding is about as much as I can take. So let me compare it with some other necks, and you can see what it looks like. Okay, so here's a few of my guitars. On the far left here is my KVXMG. Now it's got a rosewood fretboard. It's always been kind of on the lighter side as far as rosewood goes. The one in the middle is the one I just stained black. You can see how like drastically darker it is. Over here on the right is also a rosewood fretboard, but this one is much darker than obviously the King V. So it might have been stained or dyed or something, like at the factory or something. But this one is even darker than this one. And then finally over here on the very end is a soloist with a dark walnut. Let me dark walnut fretboard, and that's pretty dark. So there you go. There's just a side-by-side comparison with some different guitars. Again, I'm quite happy with this. Once the strings are on, you can't really see those spots I was pointing out earlier. And right now I'm about 18 inches from the guitar. And I think it looks pretty awesome. Especially compared next to this. Now, originally this neck was a lighter rosewood. Not quite as light as this, and definitely not as dark as that. So I would say maybe a shade darker than this, or two. So it is quite a difference. Alright, hope this was helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe.